August 1966. A 60-year-old man with a dying heart walks into a garage where 12 armed killers hold his daughter hostage. He carries only a sword and has 72 minutes before his body fails. What did Bumpy Johnson do that made grown men run screaming into the night to understand how it all led here? We go back to where it truly began. The garage smelled like death and motor oil. Blood pooled on the cracked concrete floor, spreading in dark rivulets that followed the grooves and imperfections like a map of terrible geography. The overhead fluorescent lights flickered and buzzed, casting everything in a sick greenish glow that made the scene look like a nightmare that refused to end. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson knelt in the center of it all. He was 60 years old, and tonight he looked every single day of it. His gray silk suit, the one that had cost him $300 at a tailor shop in Midtown, was shredded and soaked through with blood. Some of it was his, most of it wasn't. His shirt hung in tatters, revealing the thin Kevlar vest underneath that had stopped 2 bullets, but hadn't stopped the knife that had opened a gash across his ribs. In his right hand, he held the katana, or what was left of it. The blade had snapped halfway down its length, leaving a jagged edge that still gleamed with fresh red. The silk wrapping on the handle was dark and wet. His left hand pressed against his chest, trying to calm the frantic, irregular hammering of his heart. It felt like a bird trapped in a cage made of bone, beating itself to death against the bars. Around him, in a rough circle that seemed almost ritualistic, lay 12 bodies. 12 men who had woken up that morning thinking they were predators. 12 men who had laughed and drank beer and made plans for tomorrow. 12 men who would never see the sunrise again. Some were face down. Some were face up, their eyes open and glassy, staring at nothing. One of them, a massive man they had called Tiny, had his hand stretched out as if reaching for something just beyond his grasp. The air was thick with the copper smell of blood and the acrid stench of fear. Sweat and voided bowels. Someone's radio was still playing, crackling with static and the distant voice of a late-night DJ talking about the weather tomorrow. It would be sunny and hot. The voice sounded obscene in this place of slaughter. Bumpy tried to stand. His legs shook. His vision swam with black spots that bloomed and faded like ink dropped in water. He could taste blood in his mouth, coppery and warm. His heart gave a violent lurch, skipping 2 beats, then racing to catch up. The pain in his chest was no longer just pain. It was a living thing. A creature with claws that dug deeper with every breath. He looked down at the broken sword in his hand. 20 years he had kept it wrapped in black silk, hidden in a place where even Mabel didn't know to look. 20 years he had promised himself he would never draw it again. And now, in one night, in less than an hour, he had broken that promise and broken the blade itself. But even as he knelt there, drowning in pain and blood and the weight of what he had done, his mind rewound itself like a film reel spinning backward. Because every ending has a beginning, and this ending, this tableau of violence and consequence, had begun exactly 72 minutes earlier, in a place that seemed 1,000 miles away from this garage of death. It began with wine and lies and a telephone call that changed everything. The restaurant was called Lombardi's, tucked into a narrow street in Little Italy where the cobblestones were uneven and the air smelled of garlic, basil, and secrets. It was the kind of place where men in expensive suits conducted business over veal scallopine and espresso, where conversations were held in low voices and eye contact meant more than words ever could. The walls were exposed brick, decorated with framed photographs of Frank Sinatra and Joe DiMaggio and other men whose names carried weight in certain circles. Bumpy sat at a corner table, his back to the wall, facing the door. It was an old habit, one that had kept him alive for 40 years. Never sit with your back exposed. Always know your exits. Always assume someone wants you dead, because in his world, someone always did. The chair beneath him was wooden and uncomfortable, deliberately so. Comfort made men careless. Discomfort kept them sharp. Across from him sat two men who represented everything Bumpy had spent his life navigating. Angelo Rossi and his nephew, Marco. Angelo was in his 70s, a relic from the days when the mafia still operated on codes of honor that actually meant something. He had a face like a dried apple, all wrinkles and liver spots, but his eyes were sharp as broken glass and twice as dangerous. He wore a charcoal suit that had been tailored in Naples, and his hands, liver-spotted and gnarled with arthritis, never stopped moving, gesturing as he spoke. Marco was younger, maybe 40, with slicked-back hair that gleamed under the amber light of the wall sconces. His suit was darker than his uncle's, almost black, and it fit him like a second skin. He had the kind of face that smiled easily, but never with the eyes. The kind of face that belonged to men who enjoyed their work a little too much. There was a gold watch on his wrist, thick and ostentatious, the kind that screamed new money trying to look like old money. The table between them was covered with the remains of their meal. Plates of linguine and clam sauce, half-eaten bread soaked in olive oil, glasses of red wine that had gone warm and slightly bitter. But nobody was eating anymore. The meal had been a formality, a pretense of civilization before the real conversation began. The kind of conversation where men measured each other's weaknesses and calculated the cost of violence. Angelo dabbed at his lips with a cloth napkin, folding it carefully. "Ellsworth," he said, his voice like gravel being poured from a bucket. He was one of the few people who still used Bumpy's real name, and he used it like a weapon, a reminder that he knew things. "We have a problem." Bumpy took a sip of his wine. It was good wine, Barolo from the Piedmont region, probably worth more than most men in Harlem made in a week. He set the glass down carefully, precisely, in the exact spot where the condensation ring had formed on the white tablecloth. He said nothing. Silence was a tool, and he wielded it like a master craftsman. Marco leaned forward, his elbows on the table in a breach of etiquette that made his uncle's jaw tighten. $2 million worth of problem, Marco said. His voice had an edge to it, an accusation wrapped in silk. $2 million that walked out of our warehouse in Red Hook 3 nights ago. Just walked right out, like it had legs and a destination. Bumpy looked at Marco. He let the silence stretch out between them, a taut wire that could snap at any moment. Marco stared back, trying to look tough, trying to look dangerous. But Bumpy had been staring down dangerous men since before Marco's father was born. He knew the difference between a wolf and a dog in wolf's clothing. "And you think I had something to do with this?" Bumpy said. It wasn't a question. His voice was calm, neutral, giving nothing away. Angelo held up a hand, a gesture that said patience, restraint. The gold rings on his fingers caught the light. "Nobody is accusing anyone of anything. Ellsworth, we are simply asking questions. The warehouse is on the border of your territory and ours. The men who hid it knew exactly when the guards would be taking their break. They knew which crates to take and which to leave. They knew the combination to the safe. This was not some random smash and grab. This was inside work. Professional work." Bumpy picked up his wine glass again, studying the deep red liquid as it caught the candlelight. "And because it happened near Harlem, you think Harlem did it?" "Not Harlem," Marco said, his voice rising slightly, his composure cracking. "You." The restaurant seemed to go quiet, the ambient noise of silverware on plates, of low conversations and laughter from other tables, seemed to fade into a distant hum. The waiter who had been approaching their table suddenly found somewhere else to be, disappearing into the kitchen like smoke. Bumpy set down his glass. He looked at Marco with the kind of calm that comes before violence, the eye of the hurricane. "Careful, boy," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying weight. "Careful what you accuse an old man of. Old men have nothing to lose, which makes us very, very dangerous." Angelo put a hand on Marco's arm, squeezing hard enough that Bumpy could see the knuckles go white. A warning. "My nephew speaks with passion, Ellsworth, but his point stands. We need to know. We need to understand. Because if this money does not come back, if the people who took it are not held accountable, then there will be consequences. You understand this. You have always understood this. The people I answer to in New York, they are not patient men. They see weakness as opportunity." Bumpy did understand. He understood perfectly. This was a shakedown dressed up as a dinner conversation, wrapped in pasta and wine in the pretense of mutual respect. They didn't have proof that he had taken their money, probably because he hadn't taken it, but they needed someone to blame. And if that someone was him, then they could justify whatever came next. A war, a hit, a territorial grab while he was supposedly weak. The truth was, Bumpy knew exactly who had taken the money. It was a crew out of Brooklyn, young and hungry and stupid. But sitting here with Marco's hostility and Angelo's cold calculation, Bumpy realized that the game had changed. They weren't here for answers. They were here to deliver a message. "I didn't take your money, Angelo," Bumpy said. His voice was steady, calm, but underneath it was iron. "But I will make inquiries. I will ask questions in my neighborhood, and if someone under my protection did this thing, they will answer to me first, and then to you. That is the best I can offer you." Angelo studied him for a long moment, reading the lines in his face like a fortune teller reads tea leaves. Finally, slowly, he nodded. "That is acceptable, Ellsworth. But time is not something we have in abundance. My people in New York. They want blood or they want money. Preferably both. You have 3 days. After that, I cannot protect you from what comes next." Before Bumpy could respond, his phone rang. The sound was shrill and out of place in the quiet restaurant, cutting through the tension like a cleaver through bone. It was one of those new flip phones, expensive and barely reliable. Junebug had the number. Mabel had the number. Only 3 other people in the world had it, and they all knew better than to use it, unless the world was ending. Bumpy pulled out the phone and looked at the screen. The number was Junebug's. Junebug, who had been with him since the old days, who had taken bullets for him and spent years in prison rather than testify. Junebug never called unless it was an emergency. Bumpy looked at Angelo, then at Marco. "I need to take this." Angelo made a gesture that said, "Go ahead, but we're watching." Bumpy flipped open the phone. "What is it?" Junebug's voice came through, crackling and panicked. "Boss, we got a situation. A bad one. It's Elisha. She's gone." The world seemed to tilt. The noise of the restaurant rushed back in all at once. Too loud. Too chaotic. Bumpy stood up from the table so fast his chair scraped against the floor with a sound like a scream. His heart began to hammer in his chest like war drums. "Gone." Bumpy's voice was quiet. Deadly quiet. "What do you mean gone?" "She went to a poetry reading downtown with 2 girlfriends. Some coffee shop in the village. They were supposed to be back by 9. The other girls made it home. Elisha didn't. We went looking. Boss. Found her purse in an alley 3 blocks from the river. Boss. There was blood on the strap. Not a lot, but enough." Bumpy's free hand gripped the table edge so hard his knuckles went white. "How much blood?" "Maybe a tablespoon. Could be a nosebleed. Could be worse. But boss, the purse was open. Her wallet was still inside. Cash and everything. This wasn't a robbery. Angelo was watching him now, reading the change in his posture, the sudden tension in his shoulders. Marco had stopped pretending to be tough and was just watching, curious. "Find her," Bumpy said into the phone. His voice was low, controlled, but underneath it was a volcano. "Turn Harlem upside down. Call in every favor. Wake up every informant. I don't care what it costs. Find my daughter." "Already on it, boss. Got 20 men on the street. But Bumpy, there's something else you need to know." Junebug paused. "Word on the street is it's the Iron Skulls. That new biker gang that's been pushing into the west side for the last 2 months. They've been talking trash about you for weeks. Saying you're old. Saying you're finished. Boss. I think they took her to make a point. I think they want you to come looking." Bumpy closed his eyes. He could see it all playing out. Some young, stupid boys deciding they wanted to make a name for themselves by going after the king, and they had chosen the one thing in the world that would guarantee their extinction. They had taken his child. "Where are they?" Bumpy asked. Each word was carved from ice. "Old garage off the West Side Highway, near Pier Forte. Used to be a radiator repair shop. They've been using it as a clubhouse for the last month. Boss, there's at least 12 of them in there. Maybe more. These aren't street kids. These are hard men. Killers." "I'm coming," Bumpy said. He closed the phone with a snap and looked at Angelo and Marco. Their faces were carefully neutral, but he could see the calculation in their eyes. They had heard his side of the conversation. They knew something had happened. They were wondering how to use it. "Gentlemen," Bumpy said. His voice was different now, colder, harder. "I'm afraid I need to leave. Family emergency." Angelo set down his wine glass with deliberate care. "Ellsworth, we are in the middle of a very important conversation. A conversation about $2 million and the future of our business relationship." "My daughter has been taken," Bumpy said. Each word fell like a stone into still water. "Taken by some animals who think they can use her to get to me. So you will forgive me. Angelo, if your $2 million is not my highest priority at this exact moment." Marco stood up, his chair scraping back. His hand moved toward his jacket, where Bumpy knew he kept a gun. "You walk away now. We take it as an admission of guilt. You understand that you walk away from this table, and we consider this partnership dissolved. We consider you an enemy." Bumpy looked at him. In that moment, Marco saw something in the old man's eyes that made him freeze. It was the look of a man who had killed before and would kill again without hesitation. It was the look of a man who had nothing left to lose. "You do what you need to do," Bumpy said quietly. "But understand this. If my daughter dies because I was sitting here talking about money, then I will come back here, and I will kill both of you with my bare hands, not because of business, not because of territory or respect, but because you made me choose between her life and your feelings. And I chose wrong." He turned and walked toward the door. Behind him, he heard Angelo say something in Italian, sharp and angry. He heard Marco say, "Let him go, uncle. Let the fool dig his own grave." But Bumpy didn't look back. He pushed through the door and out onto the street, where the August night pressed down on him like a physical weight. The air was thick and hot, tasting of car exhaust and garbage and humanity packed too close together. Junebug was waiting by the car, a black Cadillac Eldorado that gleamed under the streetlights like a panther. He had the engine running. When he saw Bumpy's face, his own face went pale. "Boss?" Junebug said, opening the passenger door. "What do you want to do?" Bumpy got into the car. The leather seat was cool against his back despite the heat. He sat there for a moment, his hands on his knees, his head bowed. His heart was hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat, taste it on his tongue like blood. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small amber bottle. He popped the cap and shook out a tiny nitroglycerin pill, placing it under his tongue. The sharp, peppery taste flooded his mouth. He waited, counting his heartbeats, feeling for the moment when the constriction in his chest would ease. 10 seconds. 20. The pain receded to a dull ache. Junebug pulled the car out into traffic, cutting off a taxi that honked angrily. As they headed north toward Harlem, the lights of Manhattan blurring past the windows like stars, the weight of what had just happened began to settle on Bumpy's shoulders. Money could be earned back. Territory could be reclaimed. Respect could be rebuilt. But a child, once lost, was lost forever. "Tell me," Bumpy said, his voice cutting through the hum of the engine. "Tell me everything you know about these iron skulls." Junebug's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He licked his lips, a nervous gesture. "Boss, there's something you need to understand. This wasn't random. This wasn't some gang of idiots making a stupid move. This was planned." Bumpy turned his head to look at his oldest friend. "Explain." Junebug took a deep breath. "The iron skulls. They've been in the city for 2 months. Came up from Virginia, supposedly. But the word on the street is they're being backed, financed. Someone is paying them to cause trouble, to stir things up, to push into territories that have been stable for years." "Who?" Bumpy asked, though he was starting to suspect he already knew the answer. "Can't confirm it, but the timing, boss. They show up right when your meeting with the Italians is happening. Right when $2 million goes missing from a warehouse you supposedly had access to. Right when Angelo Rossi needs someone to blame." Junebug glanced over, his eyes full of pain. "I think this is a setup, boss. I think they took Elisha to force your hand. If you go after the bikers, the Italians will take it as proof you were working with them. If you don't go after the bikers, Elisha dies and you look weak. Either way, you lose." Bumpy closed his eyes. It was elegant. Really. Brutal and vicious and elegant in its simplicity. Take away a man's choices until the only option left is the one that destroys him. Angelo Rossi hadn't gotten to be 70 years old in the mafia by being stupid. If Bumpy died tonight, the Italians could move into Harlem without resistance. If Bumpy lived but was exposed as weak, unable to protect his own family, his empire would crumble from within. "So if I go," Bumpy said quietly, "I die or I start a war I can't win. And if I don't go, Elisha dies. That's about the size of it, boss." The car was silent for a long moment, just the hum of the engine and the distant wail of a police siren somewhere in the night. Then, slowly, Bumpy began to laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It wasn't even a bitter laugh. It was the laugh of a man who had just realized that the game he thought he was playing was not the game he was actually in. "Then I'll die after they die first," Bumpy said. The laughter faded from his voice, replaced by something cold and final. "Turn left up here. We're not going to the garage yet." Junebug frowned. "Where are we going?" "Solomon's Vault." Junebug's eyes went wide. "Boss, you can't be serious. That place has been sealed for 15 years. You said you'd never go back there. You said the things in that place should stay buried." "Plans change," Bumpy said. "The world changes. Tonight, I need something from the past to deal with the present." The car turned left, heading east instead of west, moving deeper into Harlem. They drove past brownstones and apartment buildings, past corner stores with barred windows and churches with stained glass that glowed in the darkness. They drove until they reached a street that looked like all the others. Junebug pulled the car to a stop in front of what looked like an abandoned storefront. The windows were boarded up, covered with graffiti and old posters. But Bumpy could see past the decay. could remember when this place had been something else. He got out of the car. The night air hit him like a fist, hot and humid. He walked to the door, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a key ring. One of the keys was old, brass, tarnished, almost black with age. He fitted it into the lock. The lock turned. The door opened with a groan. Inside, the air was cooler, musty, smelling of old paper and gun oil and memories. Bumpy felt along the wall until he found the light switch. Fluorescent tubes flickered to life overhead, casting harsh white light on what had once been a speakeasy during Prohibition, then a numbers joint, then a storage facility for things that couldn't be stored anywhere else. In the back room, behind a false wall that swung open on hidden hinges, was a collection that would have made a museum curator weep. Weapons from every era, every conflict, every corner of the world. Guns and knives and clubs and brass knuckles. But Bumpy walked past all of them, moving toward a single item hanging on the far wall, wrapped in black silk that had yellowed with age. He reached up and lifted it down. The weight was familiar, comforting, terrifying. He unwrapped the silk slowly, reverently, the way a priest might unveil a holy relic. The katana beneath was a work of art, forged in Japan in the late 19th century by a master smith whose name had been lost to time. The blade was dark, almost black, folded steel that had been quenched in blood according to legend. The handle was wrapped in ray skin, rough enough to prevent slipping even when wet. The guard was iron, shaped like a coiled dragon. Junebug stood in the doorway, watching. "Boss, you swore you'd never use that again. You promised Master Tanaka on his deathbed." Bumpy ran his finger along the scabbard, not touching the blade. "Not yet. I promised I would only use it once more. Once, for a cause worthy of the steel, worthy of the oath, worthy of the blood it would spill." He looked at Junebug. Today is that day, 20 years ago. Master Tanaka had placed this blade in Bumpy's hands for the first time. The old Japanese man had fled his country after the war with nothing but his skill and his swords. He had seen something in the young Bumpy Johnson, something that reminded him of the samurai code. "You have the heart of a warrior," Tanaka had said in halting English. "But a warrior without control is just a murderer. This blade is not for anger. It is not for pride. It is for protection of what cannot be protected any other way. Promise me, Bumpy-san, promise me you will only draw this blade one more time in your life. Make that time count." Bumpy had promised, and he had kept that promise for 20 years, even when it would have been easier to break it. "Tonight," Bumpy said, opening his eyes, "I keep my promise." He wrapped the sword in a long coat, concealing it. He grabbed one more item from a shelf, a small digital recorder, barely bigger than a pack of cigarettes. He tucked it into his jacket pocket. Junebug saw the movement. "What's that for?" "Insurance," Bumpy said. "If I don't walk out of that garage, someone needs to know what happened. Someone needs to know why." They walked back to the car. Bumpy slid into the passenger seat, the sword laid carefully across his lap. As Junebug started the engine and pulled back out onto the street, Bumpy pulled out his phone and dialed a number he had memorized but never called. The phone rang 3 times. Then a voice answered, scratchy and suspicious. "Yeah, Doc," Bumpy said. "I need information. I need it fast, and I need it complete." Dr. Elijah Cross, known as Doc on the street, was a man who made his living selling information the way other men sold drugs or guns. He knew everything about everyone. "Bumpy," Doc said. "Little late for a social call. What do you need?" "The Iron Skulls, the biker gang working out of the garage on Pier 40. I need to know how many, who they are, what their capabilities are. Everything." There was a pause. "You sure you want this information?" "Bumpy." Because once I tell you, you can't unknow it. And what you're thinking about doing, it's suicide. The information, Bumpy said. His voice was steel. Now, Doc sighed. 12 confirmed members. 8 of them are ex-cons. Just got out of various facilities in the last 6 months. Robbery, assault, manslaughter. Hard men, but not soldiers. The other 4 are worse. They're professional. 2 of them have military backgrounds. Dishonorable discharges. One of them, a guy named Riker, he's the leader, did time in Virginia for killing 6 men in a bar fight. Not a brawl. Bumpy. A calculated execution. He's smart. He's dangerous. And word is, he's being paid to take you out. Bumpy absorbed the information, filing it away. Who's paying him? Can't confirm. But the money's coming from somewhere with deep pockets. Italian deep pockets, if you know what I mean. I know exactly what you mean, Bumpy said. He ended the call. Junebug was driving slowly now, approaching the western edge of Harlem where the buildings gave way to warehouses and empty lots, where the Hudson River gleamed in the moonlight like a sheet of black glass. In the distance, Bumpy could see the garage, a squat brick building isolated at the end of a dead-end street. Light spilled from the cracks around the doors. He could hear music, faint but distinct, some kind of rock and roll that thumped like a heartbeat. "Boss," Junebug said. His voice was thick with emotion. "This is suicide. 12 men, all of them killers. You got a bad heart, huh? You're 60 years old. This ain't the old days." "I'm not expecting to walk out," Bumpy said quietly. "But I'm walking in, because if I don't, Elisha dies. And if Elisha dies, then I'm already dead. The rest is just paperwork." He looked at his watch. It was 11:47 at night. The witching hour. The hour when the world balanced between one day and the next. Between life and death. Bumpy unwrapped the sword. The blade caught the streetlight, gleaming with a darkness that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He tested the weight, felt the balance. Strike clean. Strike true. No hesitation. No mercy. He reached into his pocket and pressed the record button on the small device. "Stay here," Bumpy said to Junebug. "No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, you stay in this car. You understand? This is not your fight. Boss, I can't let you do this alone." "You're not letting me do anything," Bumpy said. "I'm an old man making an old man's choice. You're a young man with a future. Don't throw it away for my mistakes." He opened the car door and stepped out into the night. The heat hit him immediately, oppressive and thick. He could smell the river, brackish and rotten, mixing with the smell of motor oil and cigarettes and beer. He could hear voices inside the garage, rough and loud. "When's the old man gonna show up? Maybe he's too scared. Maybe he's gonna call the cops." "Nah, man. Guys like that, they got pride. He'll come. And when he does, we'll teach him what happens when you disrespect the Iron Skulls." More laughter. Cruel. Casual. Bumpy walked toward the building, the sword held loosely in his right hand. He didn't run. Kings don't run. He walked with the measured, rolling gait of a man who owned the pavement beneath his feet. The garage door was slightly open, light spilling out in a yellow rectangle. He could see inside now. See the shapes of men moving around. See the motorcycles parked in a row. See the beer bottles and the cigarette smoke. And in the back corner, a shape that made his heart clench. Elisha, sitting on the floor, her hands tied, her face pale but her eyes defiant. She was alive. That was all that mattered. Everything else was just details. Bumpy reached the door. He noticed the circuit breaker on the outside wall, a gray metal box that controlled the power to the building. He reached up and flipped it. There was a click, barely audible, inside. The lights went out. The music died. For a moment, there was just darkness and confused voices. What the hell? Who killed the power? Check the breaker box. Then Bumpy pushed the door open and stepped into the garage, into the darkness, into the belly of the beast. The sword was steady in his hand. The recorder was running in his pocket. His heart was hammering against his ribs like it wanted to escape. The door closed behind him with a sound like a coffin lid shutting. And in that moment, in that darkness, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson ceased to be a man negotiating with Italians over dinner, ceased to be a father worried about his daughter, ceased to be anything except what he had always been, what he had spent 20 years trying not to be. He became vengeance. He became death. He became the last thing 12 men would ever see. The clock was ticking. 72 minutes had brought him here. Now the real work would begin. Darkness swallowed the garage whole. The sudden absence of light was so complete it felt like being buried alive. The music died mid-chord, leaving only confused, angry voices of 12 men who had just realized they were no longer the hunters. What the hell just happened? Who killed the power? I can't see anything. The voices overlapped, climbing in pitch, tinged with panic. Bumpy stood just inside the door, his back against the wall, letting his eyes adjust. Moonlight leaked through cracks in the boarded windows, creating thin silver lines. The emergency exit sign in the back glowed dull red, casting barely enough light to see shapes but not faces. Bumpy had learned to fight in darkness long before these boys were born. In prison riots, in back alleys during blackouts, in basements where the only light came from muzzle flash, darkness wasn't his enemy. Darkness was his oldest friend. He moved, silent, fluid, the katana still sheathed in his right hand, using it like a walking stick. His breathing was controlled, shallow, silent. His heart was racing. But he forced it into rhythm, forced his body to obey even as it screamed at him to stop. The bikers were scrambling, bumping into each other, into motorcycles, into workbenches. Someone knocked over beer bottles. Glass shattered. Get a flashlight. Riker, what do we do? Shut up, all of you. Shut up and listen. Bumpy smiled in the darkness. He moved deeper into the garage, staying low, using shadows as cover. He passed the first biker without the man knowing. The biker stood near a workbench, hands out like a blind man, turning in circles. Bumpy stepped behind him. He reversed his grip on the scabbard and brought the end up in a sharp arc. The hardwood caught the biker under the chin with a sound like a bat hitting a watermelon. The man dropped without a sound. One down. 30 seconds had passed. The second biker was smarter, pressing his back against a wall, a knife slashing the air. Bumpy approached from the side. He waited until the knife swept away, then struck. The pommel came down on the man's wrist. Bone cracked. The knife clattered. Before the man could scream, Bumpy's fingers pressed into pressure points on his throat. The biker's eyes rolled back. 2 down. Another 30 seconds. I heard something over there. Flashlight beams suddenly cut through darkness. 3 of them. Harsh and white. They swept across the garage like searchlights. Bumpy dropped to the floor, rolling under a motorcycle as a beam passed overhead. He could see boots now. 6 pairs moving toward him. 3 men approached from his left, moving together. 3 more spread to his right, less organized, more panicked. That left 6 accounted for. The other 2 must be guarding Elisha in the back corner. The 3 on the left were close. One started to crouch down, bringing his face level with Bumpy's hiding spot. Bumpy exploded out from under the motorcycle, driving his shoulder into the man's chest. They went down together. Bumpy was on top. He brought the pommel down once, twice, precise strikes to the temple. The other 2 reacted, swinging weapons in darkness. Bumpy rolled. A pipe whistled past his ear. He swept the legs from under the pipe wielder. The man hit the ground hard. Bumpy struck again, the sheathed sword coming down on the back of his head. The third man dropped his flashlight and ran, screaming, "He's here! The old man's here! He's killing us!" 4 down, 8 to go. The garage erupted in different chaos now. Not confusion, but cornered animals fighting back. More flashlights clicked on. 5 beams, covering angles, working together. There I see him. A gunshot cracked through the air. The muzzle flash was blinding. The bullet spanged off a metal tool rack near Bumpy's head. His ears rang. So they had guns. This changed everything. Bumpy grabbed a chain hanging from a ceiling hook and yanked it down. The chain whipped through darkness like a steel serpent. He heard it connect with flesh, heard a yelp. He threw the chain toward the flashlight beams and dove the opposite direction. Another gunshot went wide, punching a hole in the corrugated wall. "Stop shooting. You'll hit one of us. I can't see him." How is an old man this fast? Bumpy pressed against the wall, breathing hard. His chest felt squeezed in a vice. The nitroglycerin was wearing off. He needed to end this quickly or his body would end it for him. He found his voice, low and resonant, filling the garage. "You want to play in the dark?" The words echoed off metal walls. "I was born in it. I spent years in solitary confinement in the darkest hole they could find. Darkness doesn't scare me. Boys. Darkness is where men like me thrive." Flashlight beams swung wildly, trying to locate his voice, but Bumpy was already moving, his words just another distraction. He found the fuse box for emergency lights and flipped the switch. Overhead lights flickered to life. Not bright fluorescence, but dim yellow emergency bulbs casting everything in sick, jaundiced glow. It was barely better than darkness, but it was enough. And what the remaining bikers saw made them freeze in horror. 4 of their brothers were down, scattered across the garage floor like discarded toys. One face down in motor oil. One slumped against a workbench. 2 tangled together near the motorcycles. And standing in the center, untouched, unbloodied, was the old man. His gray suit was rumpled but clean, the sword still sheathed in his hand. He wasn't even breathing hard. But his eyes were ancient and terrible, something that had crawled up from the deepest ocean. Eyes of a man beyond fear, beyond mercy, beyond anything resembling human compassion. Riker stood near the back, his face pale under his blonde beard. He was tall and rangy, wearing a denim vest covered in patches, a red bandana on his head. In his right hand, a hunting knife. In his left, a flashlight. Behind him, near the tires. Elisha sat with bound hands. Another biker, heavy set with a shaved head, stood over her with a revolver at her temple. The 8th man, thin and nervous, stood beside Riker with a baseball bat. The 4 standing men stared at Bumpy, stared at their fallen comrades, trying to process how one old man had taken down 4 trained fighters in the dark without a sound. Bumpy smiled, not kindly, the smile of a shark tasting blood. "Gentlemen," Bumpy said softly, "I believe we started on the wrong foot. Let me introduce myself properly. My name is Ellsworth Johnson. Some people call me Bumpy, and I've come for my daughter." The silence was absolute. Then Bumpy took 1 step forward, and the spell broke. Riker's voice cracked like a whip. "Don't move. Don't you take another step, or I swear Tommy will blow her brains out right here." Bumpy stopped. He looked past Riker to Elisha. Their eyes met. She was crying, but her chin was raised, defiant, unbroken. "Let her go," Bumpy said calmly. reasonably. Let her walk out that door right now, and I will let you live. All of you. You can walk away and tell people about the night you met Bumpy Johnson and lived. Riker laughed nervously. You let us live. You're surrounded. Outnumbered, one old man with a sword against 8 men with guns. 4 men, Bumpy corrected. The other 4 are taking a nap. And you're not 8 anymore. Riker, you're 4. And in about 2 minutes, you're going to be less than that. How do you know my name? I know a lot of things. I know you did time in Virginia for killing 6 men. I know you're being paid by people with Italian accents. I know you think violence makes you strong when really it just makes you predictable. Bumpy took another step. And I know that right now. You're wondering if you can kill me before I kill you. Don't move. Bumpy looked at the man holding the gun to Elisha's head. What's your name, son? Tommy, he said automatically. Tommy, you look smart. Smarter than these idiots. So I'm going to make you a deal. Put that gun down and walk out. I won't stop you. Or you can keep it pointed at my daughter. And I will make your death so slow and so painful that you'll be begging God to take you. Tommy's hand started to shake. The gun wavered. Don't listen to him, Riker shouted. He's just an old man. If I'm nothing, Bumpy said quietly, then why are 4 of your men unconscious? Why is your hand shaking? Brr. Why can I smell the fear coming off you? Riker's face twisted with rage. He made a gesture. The thin man beside him suddenly pulled a revolver and fired. The gunshot was deafening. Elisha screamed. The bullet hit Bumpy in the left shoulder, spinning him halfway around. He stumbled, his hand going to the wound. Blood covered his fingers. Bumpy looked at the blood, then at Riker, and then he started to laugh. It was a terrible sound, the laugh of a man beyond pain, beyond fear, beyond sanity. You shot me, Bumpy said, still laughing. Do you know how many times I've been shot in my life? 7 times, and I'm still here. He pulled his jacket aside, revealing the thin Kevlar vest. The bullet had hit just above the protection, tearing through flesh but missing bone. It hurt. God, it hurt. But it wasn't fatal. You see, Bumpy said, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried across the garage. I didn't come here unprepared. I came knowing men like you would do exactly what you just did, because men like you always do the same thing. You see a threat, and you try to eliminate it with violence. You don't think, you just react. Bumpy reached up and gripped the katana's handle. His thumb found the guard. He pressed, a soft click as the blade released. You've had your shot, Bumpy said. Now it's my turn. The blade came out in a blur, a whisper of steel ending in a high, singing note. The katana caught the yellow light and seemed to glow, the dark blade with patterns like flowing water frozen in metal. The 4 men stared at the sword, stared at Bumpy, bleeding but upright, and realized, too late, they had made a terrible mistake. Come on then, Bumpy said softly. All of you. Come and learn what 40 years in this life teaches a man. The thin man fired again, and again. But Bumpy was already moving. He flowed like water, like smoke. The first bullet passed through where he had been. The second tore through his jacket but missed flesh. And then he was among them. The katana moved in arcs and circles, creating geometry of death in yellow light. Bumpy didn't swing wild. Every movement was precise, calculated, minimal. The blade sang through air, harmonizing with screams of men who realized they were outmatched. The thin man never got a third shot. Bumpy's blade flashed upward, striking the revolver and sending it spinning. A reverse cut caught the man across the chest. Not deep, not fatal, but enough to fold him over. Out of the fight. A 4th man rushed forward with a tire iron. Bumpy stepped inside his arc, too close for the weapon to work. The pommel came up, catching him under the ribs. As the man doubled over, Bumpy's knee came up, catching his face. 6 down, 4 to go. The remaining 2 tried to coordinate, but Bumpy moved between them, using one as a shield against the other, forcing them to chase, to wear themselves out. One had a chain, swinging it in wide arcs. But chains were predictable. Bumpy watched the pattern, counted the rhythm, and when the chain reached the apex of its swing, he stepped in. The katana flashed. The chain fell in 2 pieces, severed cleanly. The man stared at the clean cut through steel links. Then he looked at Bumpy, and he ran. He turned and sprinted for the door, abandoning his brothers. Bumpy let him go. One witness. And all the while, even as he fought, Bumpy was talking, his voice steady, conversational, a teacher giving a lesson. "Elisha," he said, parrying a desperate knife thrust. "Pay attention. This is important." Elisha stared, unable to speak. When dealing with bullies, Bumpy continued, spinning away from a wild swing, his blade drawing a thin line across the attacker's arm. "The key is not to meet violence with violence. The key is to meet it with precision." The man stumbled back. "Violence without precision is just chaos. But precision, daughter, precision is power." The wounded man tried one more desperate lunge. Bumpy sidestepped, bringing the flat of the blade down on the back of his head. 8 down. And then there were 3. Riker near the back with his hunting knife. Tommy still holding the gun to Elisha's head but shaking violently. And one more, a massive man with prison tattoos, standing beside Riker with a length of pipe. They had backed themselves into a corner, literally, pressed against the rear wall with nowhere to go, and Bumpy Johnson between them and the exit. "Well," Bumpy said, breathing hard now, sword at his side, blood dripping from his shoulder. "Here we are. The end game. I gave you a chance. You chose not to take it. Now the price has gone up." Riker's face was slick with sweat, but there was cunning in his eyes. He made a gesture, and Tommy pressed the gun harder against Elisha's temple. "Drop the sword," Riker said. "Drop it now, or I give the word and Tommy pulls the trigger. Your daughter's brains get painted on this wall." Bumpy looked at Elisha. She was shaking, sobbing, but her eyes locked on his. And in those eyes, he saw something that broke his heart and filled him with pride. She wasn't begging him to save her. She was telling him it was okay. She understood. She forgave him. "Daddy," she whispered. "It's okay. Just go. Please." Bumpy's grip tightened on the sword. His heart was hammering, his shoulder screaming, his lungs burning. The pill had worn off. He could feel his heart skipping beats, stumbling. But he couldn't leave. A king who abandons his child is no king at all. Bumpy took a deep breath. Then, slowly, he lowered the sword. He bent and placed it carefully on the concrete. The blade rang slightly as it touched down. He straightened up, hands raised. Empty. "There," Bumpy said. "The sword is down. Now let her go. Trade me for her. You wanted to hurt someone. Hurt me." Riker smiled cruelly. "Oh, we're going to hurt you, old man. But first, you need to understand that you don't make the roots anymore. We do." He nodded to the big man with the pipe. The big man stepped forward and brought it down on Bumpy's knee. The crack was audible. Bumpy dropped, grunting but not screaming. "Daddy," Elisha screamed. "Quiet," Tommy shouted. Riker walked forward slowly, savoring the moment. He stood over Bumpy. "You know what your problem is, Johnson. You think you're special, but you're not. You're just an old man. And old men die. He crouched down. We're going to beat you until you're begging us to kill you, and your daughter is going to watch. Bumpy looked up at Riker, and he smiled. You talk too much. Riker's fist came out of nowhere, catching Bumpy on the jaw and sending him sprawling. Stars exploded behind his eyes. Get up, Riker said. Get up so I can knock you down again. Bumpy pushed himself up slowly, painfully. His knee was screaming, his shoulder bleeding. His jaw felt broken, but he got up. Kings don't stay down. Riker hit him again, and again. Methodical now, taking his time, enjoying it. Each blow precisely placed, designed for maximum pain without unconsciousness. The big man joined in, using the pipe on Bumpy's back, his ribs, his legs. Elisha was crying, screaming, begging them to stop. But Tommy held her tight, held the gun steady, and through it all. Bumpy didn't make a sound. He took the beating in silence, his face blank, his eyes distant. He was counting the seconds between blows, counting the shifts in weight, counting the distance to the sword 5 feet away. But more than that, he was watching, even through the pain, even through blood running into his eyes. He was watching for the moment. The opening, the 1 second of carelessness. It came when Riker turned his back to grab a beer bottle from a crate. He wanted a drink, wanted to celebrate before finishing the job. That was the moment. Bumpy's hand shot out, grabbing the big man's wrist as the pipe came down. The big man was strong, but Bumpy had leverage and surprise. He twisted and the pipe fell, in the same motion. Bumpy drove his elbow up into the man's throat. The man gagged, stumbling back. Riker spun around, realizing too late he had made a mistake. But Bumpy wasn't going for Riker. He was going for the sword. He dove, his body screaming. His fingers closed around the handle just as Riker kicked out, catching him in the ribs. Bumpy rolled with the kick, using momentum to come up in a crouch, the katana in his hands. His vision was swimming. His heart was doing things no heart should do. He didn't have much time left. Maybe minutes, maybe seconds. But he didn't need much time. He just needed enough. Riker lunged with his hunting knife, desperate and wild. Bumpy didn't try to block, He simply moved, letting the blade pass through space where his body had been. And in that moment where Riker was overextended, Bumpy struck, not with the sword, with his foot. He kicked Riker's knee, hitting the pressure point. Riker went down on one knee, gasping. Then Bumpy did something that made Elisha scream. He turned his back on Riker. He walked toward the dropped knife, but as he passed Riker's kneeling form, he let the katana trail behind him, blade pointing backward. And Riker, in rage and pain, did exactly what Bumpy knew he would. He lunged forward, trying to tackle Bumpy from behind, and impaled himself on the blade. The katana went in just below Riker's ribs, angled upward. Riker's eyes went wide. He looked down at the blade emerging from his chest. He tried to speak, but only a wet gurgle came out. Bumpy pulled the blade free and Riker collapsed. The big man looked at his dead leader, looked at Bumpy, covered in blood, the sword dark and dripping, and he broke. He turned and ran for the door. 9 down, 10 gone. That left only Tommy and Elisha. Bumpy turned slowly, every movement agony. The sword felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. His vision was narrowing, darkness creeping from the edges. His heart was no longer just skipping beats. It was stopping, then starting, then stopping again. He looked at Tommy. The young man was pale, shaking. The gun still pressed against Elisha's head, but conviction gone. "Tommy," Bumpy said, his voice barely a whisper. "I told you you were smart. I gave you a chance. I'm giving you that chance again. Last time. Put down the gun. Let her go. Walk out. You have 10 seconds. Tommy looked at Riker's body, looked at the carnage, looked at the old man who should be dead but was still standing. I can't, Tommy whispered. If I let her go, you'll kill me. I'm already dying, Bumpy said. And it was true. He could feel it, the engine winding down. I don't have the strength to kill you even if I wanted to. But if you don't let her go in 5 seconds, I will use the last bit of strength I have to make sure you never walk again. 4, 3. Tommy, please, Elisha said softly. Please, look at me. I'm just a girl. I didn't do anything to you. Please. 2. Tommy's hand started to lower. The gun moved away from Elisha's temple, inch by inch. 1. The gun dropped. Tommy shoved Elisha away and ran, stumbling through the door into the night. 11 gone, and Bumpy was alone with his daughter in a garage full of the dead and unconscious and the lesson he had just taught the world. He tried to take a step toward Elisha. His leg gave out. He went down on one knee, the sword clattering. His left hand clutched his chest. The pain was beyond description. Everything. The universe collapsing into a single point centered behind his sternum. Daddy! Elisha scrambled to her feet, bound hands making her clumsy. She ran to him, dropping to her knees. Daddy! No, 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 no. Stay with me. Please, stay with me. Bumpy tried to smile, tried to tell her it was okay, tried to say he loved her, but the words wouldn't come. His vision was fading, going dark around the edges. He pitched forward, and the last thing he felt before darkness took him was Elisha's arms catching him, holding him, keeping him from hitting the cold concrete. The last thing he heard was her voice, crying his name, and then nothing, just the black, just the silence, just the long fall into whatever came next. Elisha's hands shook as she gripped the steering wheel. The keys had been in Bumpy's pocket, slick with blood when she fished them out. She had sawed through the rope binding her wrists with broken glass from the garage floor. Now she sat in the driver's seat, her father slumped beside her, his breathing shallow and wet, a sound like drowning. Daddy, she whispered, turning the key. The engine roared. Tell me what to do. Bumpy's eyes fluttered open, unfocused. Drive, he rasped. Blood bubbled at his mouth. Fast. Home. Don't stop. Elisha had only driven twice before, both times in empty parking lots. But tonight, with her father dying and sirens wailing in the distance, she pressed the accelerator. The Cadillac lurched forward into the night. Behind them, red and blue lights appeared, growing larger. Daddy, they're following us, Elisha said, her voice breaking. Bumpy's hand found her arm, squeezed weakly. Left at the corner, cut through the alley, kill the lights. Elisha yanked the wheel left, tires screaming, and plunged into an alley so narrow the mirrors scraped brick. She killed the headlights, driving by moonlight, and when they emerged 3 blocks later, the sirens had faded into a different part of the city. The drive to Lenox Terrace took 12 minutes that felt like 12 hours. Every bump made Bumpy gasp. Twice he stopped breathing, and twice Elisha screamed his name until he jerked back with a wet, rattling gasp. When they finally pulled up, Junebug was running toward them. Get him upstairs, Elisha said, her voice suddenly iron. Now. The apartment door opened and Mabel stood there. She took one look at her husband and she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply said, Bring him to the bedroom. Junebug, boil water. Elisha, get me the medical kit. Move. Her voice carried command from somewhere deep and old. Mabel became someone else, her hands moving with surgical precision as she cut away Bumpy's clothes, assessed his wounds. As she worked, she spoke quietly. 23 years ago, before I met you, Ellsworth, I was a field nurse in Korea. I put boys back together who had been torn apart by bullets and mortars. I swore I would never have to do this again. Her hands never stopped, needle and thread weaving through torn skin. But you saved our daughter tonight. You brought her home, so now it's my turn. Now I save you. The night stretched on. Bumpy's breathing stabilized, then worsened, then stabilized again. His heart continued to skip and stumble, but it continued. And slowly, impossibly, color began to return to his face. 7 days passed. 7 days during which the story of that garage spread through the city like wildfire. The two bikers who ran told the story, and with each telling, it grew larger, more mythic, more terrifying. By the third day, people said Bumpy had walked into a nest of 20 men. By the fifth day, they said he did it with his bare hands. By the seventh day, they said he did it while already dead, his ghost refusing to fall until his daughter was safe. When Bumpy finally opened his eyes on the morning of the 8th day, Junebug was sitting beside him. "Boss," Junebug said, eyes wet. "Welcome back. How long?" "A week. The doctor said you shouldn't be alive." Junebug leaned forward. "Boss, everything's changed. Angelo Rossi called 3 days ago, said he respects what you did, said any man who would walk into hell alone for his family deserves respect. They're backing off the money thing. They found the real thieves. And they're backing off Harlem. Completely." Bumpy closed his eyes. "And the bikers? They left the city that night, took the first bus south. The Iron Skulls are finished. Boss, I don't think anyone's going to test you for a long time." 3 weeks later, Bumpy sat on the balcony in the late afternoon sun, his left arm in a sling. Elisha sat across from him. Between them on the table lay the katana, cleaned and oiled, gleaming in its black scabbard. "You wanted to learn," Bumpy said. Elisha nodded. "I want to be strong like you." Bumpy picked up the sword, felt its weight, then set it back down. "The first lesson has nothing to do with fighting. The first lesson is knowing when to fight and when to walk away. Strength isn't about how many men you can defeat. It's about knowing when to use violence and when to use wisdom." He looked out over Harlem. "I spent 40 years believing power came from fear, that respect came from violence. But tonight, when I almost lost you, when I thought I might die on that garage floor, the only thing I cared about was whether you knew I loved you." Elisha's eyes filled with tears. "I knew. Daddy, I always knew." Bumpy took her hand. "Strength, my daughter, isn't about making people fear you. Strength is about being the wall between the people you love and the darkness that wants to take them. Remember that. The real measure of power isn't how many enemies you defeat. It's how many people you keep safe." The sun set over the Hudson, painting the sky orange and purple. On a balcony high above the city, a father and daughter sat together, bound by blood and love. The katana lay between them, wrapped again in black silk, its work finished. It would not be drawn again in Bumpy's lifetime. The promise was kept, and the legend of the night Bumpy Johnson walked into darkness and brought back light would be told in Harlem for generations to come. A reminder that kings are not measured by the territories they conquer, but by the families they protect and the love they leave behind.